Hello, everyone. Hello. You can't see my hands. Look, how spooky is that? There they are. Okay, so welcome to another edition of Mysterious Worlds. We're back, everyone. I had a bit of a family emergency, so I've had a few weeks off. And now I'm back and up and running. And tonight, my first guest, let me find his banner. There you go. Right. So tonight, our first guest is Jason McLean. I was about to say McLean then. No, Jason McLean.
There you go.
Gates.
Hi.
Hello, Jason. How are you?
Oh, so far so good. I see you're on the bridge of the Enterprise D.
Oh, absolutely. Love the ship.
I have to admit, I think it's got some flaws, but my favorite ship is the Enterprise from the show Enterprise, the NX-01.
Yeah.
But the Enterprise, as far as the more modern, again, how can you not love the Enterprise D? Enterprise Z may be my favorite because it always kind of did what I wanted them to do with it. But the Enterprise Z is about as good as you can get, I suppose, particularly from the bridge. The bridge was wonderful.
Absolutely. I've always wondered, that they portray the spaceship as like miles and miles of tunnel, and then they always seem to get from the bridge to the engine room within seconds.
Yeah.
That always baffled me a bit.
Well, I mean, that's the entire point of having the turbo lift, right? It gets you where you're going pretty quick, unless the plot calls for you not to get there quickly.
Absolutely. I think it's just a case of they just get into the turbo lift and it just beams you across. Seconds.
Yep.
Okay, so first question.
Sure.
How long have you been in the paranormal for?
So that's sort of a complicated question. I've been around for a long time. But as far as on the more public face, a lot of my stuff goes back. I was doing a lot of actually like prophecy work in eschatology around 2014, 2015. But there were some minor things I did around that time as well. I think really it's around 2017, 2018 when I started being more public facing with this.
Yeah.
So again, on a public facing side, last 5 years, really. 5-6 years, but a lot of my where I really started doing this more as a again like the weekly shows and stuff like that last 3 to 4. But yeah, I've been around for a while, just researching and working and just doing what I do, and finally I was like, okay, I got to talk about this and actually present some stuff, and so that's sort of around 2017, 2018.
Yeah. Fantastic. What got you into it? Like right at the beginning, did you just have an interest, or did you see things?
So that's where it gets complicated. If you asked me even 5, 6, 7 years ago, I would say I kind of fell into it. But honestly, it all does stem from my encounter when I was 12.
Okay.
I was I recorded in my book. In a lot of detail, but the really quick version of it is it was summer. It was about 11 o'clock a.m. And I was fishing with a friend of mine and in a creek by our house or by my house, like a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile south. In Texas, for those who don't know, particularly North Texas, we sit on a giant limestone slab. So a lot of our creeks are actually deep into this limestone, and this is like 50. So getting into the creek, you're like 15, 20 feet deep, right?
Yeah.
From where the top is, and it's pretty much sheer cliffs all the way around. But there's a few places where the walls like collapsed from runoff and stuff, so you can get into it. My friend had already left, like he was already heading up, and I was on my way out. I heard a call that I didn't recognize at all. I was like, it's really weird. So I sort of poked my head out from the tree line. So I'm kind of elevated from where we were because I was going back up this sort of rocky ramp and I just got into the tree line. So I poked my head out, and at first I see what I think at first is the largest blue heron I've ever seen in my life.
Okay.
It's the right color, sort of like a Payne's gray, which is a bluish gray. And its wing shape, looks about the same, and it was kind of doing the S curve thing with the neck, and I thought it was its legs sticking out behind it. Because if you've ever seen a blue heron fly, they like to stick their legs out behind them.
Yeah.
So that's what I think I'm seeing. But again, I know how wide this place is. This creek is like 15, 20 feet across as well in
Yeah.
most places. And I'm like in the middle of a straightaway, right? So it kind of snakes through a couple of towns. This creek does. And I'm sort of in the middle of the straightaway. So I'm watching this thing, and it's like, okay, this thing's got a 8 to 10 foot wingspan. That makes it way, like, again, bigger than any blue heron I've ever seen.
Yeah.
It gets 5 feet in front of my face, or it's white. It gets right in front of me, and its right wingtip is 5 feet from my face. And that's when I realize it has no feathers. What I'm looking at is the skin. And what I thought had been its legs sticking out behind it was actually a long tail with a flange on the end.
Okay.
And I just watch it fly away. Like again, it's about 10, 11 o'clock. So the sun's coming down. So it's not like I had the sun in my eyes or anything. It's just, it was a perfect sight. And I'm like, this is a pterosaur. Like, what the heck is this?
Yeah.
Long story short, I didn't tell anybody about it for 20 years because I'm like, what is going on? I can't have seen this here. I lived, at the time I was in DeSoto, Texas, which is a suburb of Dallas. And by suburb, I mean the north boundary marker for DeSoto is the southern boundary marker for the city of Dallas.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, yeah, I think some of these things are probably still around, right? Because of some stuff that I was already sort of looking into as a kid. But I'm like, but not here, right? Africa or Papua New Guinea, but not here, not Dallas, Texas. That's insane. Yeah. And the worst part is that not too long after that, I saw the Mysterious Origins of Man that came out on NBC. It was just a short thing.
Yeah.
And my dad got the companion VHS tape, and I learned about the living pterosaur sightings in Texas.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but that's all South Texas, right? That's the Rio Grande River, valley area.
Yeah.
And for those who are like, well, but it's still Texas. Please understand how big Texas is. This is,
I can say, I should imagine it's massive.
Yeah. The distance between where I'm at and where those sightings are, if I were at 70 miles an hour, it's 8-9 hours. It's an 8 or 9 hour drive.
Wow.
So they're not close. So at no point did I think did I ever consider my sighting valid. I'm like, I had to have seen something else.
Yeah.
I had known Ken Gerhardt, the leading sort of aerial cryptozoologist, for years before I told him about my encounter. Like I said, I even wrote a book or a very, very short pamphlet on using artwork as a way of ancient artwork as a way of showing that the rampharactoid pterosaurs had survived up until very, very recently, if not were still around. I never believed that what I saw could be right, even though I'm literally writing a book on showing how the best explanation for what you would call the wyvern is a rampharactoid pterosaur, just straight up. And it wasn't until, again, I sort of finally came forward with my experience. I started working on Metroplex Monsters. I finally was like, okay, this is what it is. And what happened was Ken, again, I was talking to him and Lyle Blackburn, and they're like, hey, we got these sightings in southern Oklahoma. You're the only one we know in North Texas that has this kind of sighting. So I go public, and I get a bunch of these sightings dropped in my lap immediately because everyone's like, oh, someone else has seen these things?
Yeah.
And they're all in the same pattern. Like, they go literally from essentially where my sighting was. I have two other sightings that happened later that all involve that same creek and same area. And then I have a few in Cedar Hill, which is just a little further west, and then Kennedale, which is just a little further west. And then just north of that, there's a sighting in Fort Worth, like 8 miles north. And so there's, I have them out going through Crosbyton, which is just much further west. It's a 5-hour drive from where I'm at now, which is just south of Dallas. So there's a clear migration pattern with these creatures. They seem to be coming back to the same area. They seem to be going outwards, out towards the desert. A lot of accounts of people who didn't get a good look at, say, the specific creature in the air, but they all describe them as large birds, right? Because usually it happens at night, right?
Yeah.
And they're just much, much larger than anything really should be.
Mm-hmm.
So what we have is a very consistent, description of these creatures, because the ones that I'm the biggest fans of, the ones that I put in my books, the ones I report on, tend to be daylight sightings.
Yeah.
It's early morning, or they actually pass in front of the high beams of a car so that they can actually see them, right? Because there's a ton of, I've got dozens and dozens of stories of people talking about these large birds, these mysterious birds whose wings are the size of a 2-lane highway.
Yeah.
But they don't get a good look at them because they're driving and they sort of come over and then bank away. But it's dark, so they don't ever get a good look.
Yeah.
So, long story short, that's what kind of got me into this, and that seems to be my specialty. But the team I'm with over at Texas Front Porch, you can find them on YouTube, TEX''S Front Porch, because it's his front porch. We go to Brown Springs, Oklahoma, which is just on the other side of the Red River, and it's an interesting area. We do a lot of Bigfoot research, but it's also a highly paranormal area as well. So it's actually become a very good breeding ground for us to experiment with several ideas that kind of anathema in the Bigfoot community, but have really solidified a lot of ideas as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've watched a few documentary programs on the telly in regards to the Bigfoot, and some of what you said is quite indicative of the Bigfoot, other than flying around. But
right,
if these big bird-like creatures are flying around, why would they be like road level to see, to passing headlights and things? That just, I don't know. Unless obviously they're just taking off or something.
Right. No, and that's a valid question. There's a lot of, at least with like the pterosaurs, like, don't get me wrong, there's a large question as to whether or not some of these things may be paranormal, right? Again, the ones I like are broad daylight sightings, right? And there's a consistency and a pattern to them that indicates something that's more organic. However, where my sighting and several other sightings have occurred, in right smack dab in between all this, is literally an area called Witch Mountain in Cedar Hill.
Okay.
And so there's a number of paranormal events that have been cataloged there. And very, very recently, I've been getting several accounts of massive orbs, or, they're calling them UFOs, but they're very, very orb-like. And they're just sitting there in the middle of, just sitting there. Massive, brilliant orbs. And other strange phenomena. So I can't rule out that there's a paranormal aspect to what I saw, right? What appears to be a living pterosaur. But usually with a lot of paranormal stuff, there's other phenomena associated with it that we don't really see with these specific sightings. Yeah. And there are elements to them that make sense, considering even most paleontologists believe that pterosaurs glided more than, say a traditional bird. It's not they don't ever flap their wings, but they do seem to rely on gliding, getting high up and moving out. And that's kind of what we see. The area that these things are seen in tend to be, like you said, where I saw mine, it's 15 feet. And so essentially you have a nice little wind channel in this creek. They're often sighted, again, Crosbyton, they're seen in in sort of like these valleys, these very deep valleys that are there between the mesas. And so there's, again, even Witch Mountain itself, north where Dallas is, there's essentially this sloping plate that goes up just a little bit, but then on